Grab your pre-workout and turn up that volume. It is time for a new episode of the Powerlifter's Den with your host, Cam Smith. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Powerlifter's Den. I'm your host, Cam Smith, and today I wanted to bring on Amber Dawn from Kodiak Barbell. Amber, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you for having me on the podcast, first and foremost. My name, as you said, is Amber Dawn. I'm a coach with Kodiak Barbell, originally from Canada, much like Stuart Locke, and now working here in the States, and my business is now US-wide. I've been doing that down in the States since 2020, but I've been coaching since 2018. So yeah, that's pretty much the rundown so far.
Awesome. So, yeah, we'll go a little bit more into your background. I like to kind of get everyone's origin story, what kind of got them into powerlifting and what kind of got them onto their first platform.
Sure. Um, well, I started getting serious in the gym around 2014. I was diagnosed with hypothyroid due to, I kind of like fucked my system up basically. I battled anorexia and binge eating for well over a decade. And in 2014, I finally like went and saw a doctor and we got everything tested and I'm on medication for the rest of my life because of it. So it was kind of like a wake up call. It was like, hey, you got to start taking better care of your body. So I started learning how to eat better. And in the process, I was already in the gym, but then my mindset shifted to like, I don't want to put so much emphasis towards what I look like. I want to do something with my body. And the gym that I was training at, it was just like a commercial gym. So I asked for a trainer that could actually teach me how to lift properly. And I got set up with my first trainer. His name was Anthony Harder, and we're still really good friends, but he changed my life 100%. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for him. Um, and that was kind of it. Like I went headfirst into it. And then I don't know if you know who Furious Pete is from Canada.
It sounds
Um,
familiar. I think,
he was pretty big in the YouTube world, and he was somebody that I looked up to. He
yeah,
had also battled,
yep, I
yeah,
remember him
he,
now.
he had also he had battled anorexia as well, so I felt a connection there, and he was really strong, and so I would say those two things really got me into powerlifting, and then social media started to grow, and I started to see women, particularly Gracie Vanoss. I saw her on social media, and I was like, this is super cool, not knowing that multiply was any different than raw. Um, and I was like, I think I want to do that. If I can actually like challenge my strength, I think that would be super cool. And then I just like I got around a bunch of multiply lifters and they taught me how to lift. And that was really it. Like I did my first meet in 2016 in rats. Like I think most people start out from back then. Um, and that was it. Like I was hooked.
Yeah. And then I guess from there, obviously you're mostly into coaching, not mostly, but you're into coaching now. That's kind of like your passion.
Yeah.
Maybe how long into kind of competing did you kind of get the drive to maybe help others?
Oh man. That's a funny story because I remember talking to Anthony and being like, I would never want to do what you do. And like I don't know. I got to a point where like I was watching people in the gym and I just really wanted to help them learn the things that I had learned. And uh, I got really kind of into watching Jordan Shallow on YouTube and learning about hip anatomy. And I mean, all the things that we learn about is as we get into powerlifting, like we need healthy hips, we need healthy shoulders, et cetera, right? And I kind of just became really obsessed with learning about that stuff. And I just wanted to help people the way I was helped, and that's kind of it.
And then from there, how long into coaching did you connect with Stuart and start working with Kodiak?
So Stu and I go back to, was it 2019 or 2020? I think it was 2019 March. Um, we hadn't met in person, but we had met through social media through a connection. Um, I did the prescript course level one during COVID, and Stu and I started working together as coach and clients last year, 2023. Before that, I was in Washington and I was working with Chris Bridgeford. So I was coaching out of his gym and with his group of trainers and coaches. Um, and then, yeah, I started working with Stu as a client and I just kind of brought it up to him. I was like, look, if like 6 months down the line, if you wouldn't mind sitting down and having a conversation with possibly about possibly bringing me on as a coach, I would love to work with Kodiak. It's kind of something I've wanted to do for a while. But now that we've worked together, we can kind of understand each other a little bit better to have that conversation. And he like didn't even think twice about it. He was like, "Yep, let's go through it. Let's put you through everything." And like, I think I was only a client of his for maybe a couple months before I started working with Kodiak as a coach.
Yeah, and so what kind of with maybe some coaching advice or someone like I kind of do it as like a side hobby and just enjoy doing it, but um, I know the market is very saturated and it's kind of very difficult to find people, especially in the sport of very stubborn people, to kind of take that step to hire a coach. So, what are some of the things that kind of helped you make those connections and find you some clients?
Oh man, I put myself at every meet possible, every meet. Um, when I got down here, I made sure I was at every big event. The first one was Kern 2021. That was the last Kern. Put myself there, and like thankfully, and I'm very grateful for my experiences with Bridgeford. You know, having worked with him for so long, knowing him got me connected to a lot of people as well. But like, I also put myself at every event that I could put myself at. I traveled the country, you know, from the Kern, JP Price's meets over in Missouri, and then I was at Go. Like, I did everything that I could.
Mhm.
And I think that's if you're looking to be an online coach, particularly in powerlifting, get yourself to every meet that you can. Whether it's local to start out, it doesn't matter. Just get your face out there and network. Because I think a lot of people forget that coaching and personal training is it's a sales business.
Yeah.
And you have to sell yourself. And it's super important to get yourself into those environments and network with people. That's going to get your face into, you know, their mind, and then they're going to trust you, and they're going to be able to send people that come to them that might not be the best for them to you. Like, you just got to talk to people, and you got to get yourself out there.
Yeah, and that's kind of something that I do with the podcast. But I guess another question from that would be kind of when you go to these bigger level meets, like I would assume that most of these athletes there do have coaches. So
Mhm.
I feel like that might be in my mind, that's kind of a sticking point. But how did
Sure.
that kind of work out for you?
Um, you know, despite a lot of individuals competing having coaches, that doesn't necessarily mean that like, and I don't want to say like they're going to leave their coach for you. That's not what I'm saying. But
Yeah,
like, you meet someone and maybe they vibe better with you. You know, you have to work with somebody that you're going to mesh with. And you know, I get a lot of females that come to me, obviously because I'm a woman. But I also work with plenty of men. And I've also just met individuals at meets that are there on their own. So regardless of the fact that there are individuals there that have coaches, don't go into it with that mindset that like, well, all these people have coaches, they're never going to want to hire me, because you never know. If you get one client out of that meet that doesn't have a coach, that might be working off, say, like a juggernaut program, and they saw you, they saw how you are either working with one of your clients or communicating with people around you, that one client is better than getting none. So you got to put yourself out there.
I think this is kind of a good segue to kind of go into what we were talking about before we started the episode with um, the whole having a connection. I think coaching is way more important than just being able to write up a program. I'm pretty sure
Hmm.
anyone at this level can write a program that'll get you somewhere, but being able to actually coach an athlete and kind of be their friend more than just their coach is very important.
I completely agree. I do think it's important to have boundaries, absolutely. But I think when you build a relationship with your clients, and like they trust you and they see someone that they can rely on and come to with things that aren't necessarily training related, like you have to be okay opening up that door, of course. But like, if you can have somebody that trusts you and sees that you genuinely care about them as a person, you're going to have a client for life. Like, get to know parts of their external gym life, you know, like their birthday. Learn the birthday so you can wish them happy birthday. Learn about their family or like the events that they're doing, you know, ask them about their vacation. Those relationships can last if you invest in them. And then you're going to have a client for life, and then you're constantly going to have a paycheck.
Yeah.
So, like, you have to care about your people. They can't just be a number and a dollar sign.
Yeah, and just like any of these strength sports, like powerlifting is a hobby. They do have an outside
Yeah.
life. They do have a day job, and it also not only is it important to kind of have that good connection for communication, but um, being able to kind of know what maybe other outside stress factors they have that are kind of affecting their performance, or maybe they had a good week, or maybe they were on a bender last weekend, so their lifts are a
Hmm.
little lagged this week. But if you're just a here's your program, talk to me next week kind of coach, then you're not going to know why they're dropping in performance.
Well, exactly. And you have to be able to create that safe space for them to be able to be okay coming to you and be like, hey, I kind of got really drunk last night. And like, I know it wasn't the best for my performance today, but I'm just letting you know that this is what happened. And like, you have to understand that, like, again, powerlifting is a hobby. And if you're just going to make them feel like shit for it, they're probably not going to want to stick with you. So you have to understand that like life outside of the gym happens and you have to be accepting of it. And okay to kind of hold them accountable and be like, hey, like maybe that wasn't the best decision and now you're kind of suffering for it, but we're going to do what we can do in the gym today and maybe we'll be a little bit more prepared next time, especially if say you're in prep. And I can completely attest to this. I have been in prep and I recently just pulled out of a meet and I'm not going to compete for the rest of the year because I want to invest more in my personal life. When you're prepping, everything goes into it. And you have to be ready to invest everything into it in order to have your best performance. And I'm at a point in my life where I really want to invest in my relationships outside of the gym and building a life outside of the gym versus it being number one. And to be a coach that understands that and accepts that from your clients, I think like it shows them that you really care about them as people and not just as clients.
And I guess more into that, what are some of the, I guess, strategies or tactics that you use to kind of build the relationship with your clients?
I think the first thing that I always bring up with my clients is a variable checklist. So, for instance, if they come to me and they haven't had a great session, I just say, let's go through a variable checklist. Let's understand why we didn't have a good session. They can explain to you what happened. Okay, then you dive deeper. If they're having sleepless nights, okay, is there something going on outside of this that might be impacting your sleep that maybe you need to talk to somebody about? I'm opening that door for you. If you need somebody to talk, I'll listen. Um, you have to sometimes ease them into it. Sometimes you'll get clients that will just like vomit everything on you, and that's okay. But then sometimes you'll get clients where you just have to slowly kind of peel away the layers and let them know that like they can trust you and you're not going to judge them for something. And a variable checklist is how I've always done that because it kind of peels away the layers bit by bit to let them open up to you a little bit more of like, life outside the gym has been really stressful because XYZ. Okay, how can we better deal with that to maybe get the best out of our training and like is there ways that I can help you manage this?
Yeah, and I think that's huge to be able to adapt to their issues that are happening too, because they're it makes them feel less like, I guess, disappointed. Like you're not going to be as disappointed when you can actually know what's going on and understand like, oh, they had a bad week because I don't know, they lost their job, or they couldn't
Right.
sleep because they had a breakup or something crazy like that, to where you aren't just looking at, oh, their bench was 30 pounds less this week, they must not be doing the things they need to do.
Right. And like that's not always going to be it. Like they could be doing everything, but if something outside is causing them to be really stressed and their stress management skills might not be the best, I think as a coach, it's your job to try and help them find better stress management skills.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they have to deal with those things on their own, but like you can help guide them to figure out the best pathway to do it. And at the end of the day, communication is the biggest aspect of coaching. Like if you're not communicating with them and they're not communicating with you, you can't do their job and you can't help them if they're not communicating with you. So like there has to be that open line of communication.
Yeah, but I would say for you, what's kind of the point where it's you got to have some tough love versus being understanding? Because there's obviously people like to make excuses, and sometimes excuses
Right.
are bullshit, to be honest. But sometimes they actually make
I
sense.
agree.
So, I guess for you, what are some of the things that are kind of like the tough love?
I would definitely say if it's something that is consistent, if it's something that comes up more than once. For example, you know, when football season starts, I have a couple clients that like to go on benders because a game is on.
Oh no.
And and then they come into the gym and they're like, I was really drunk this weekend and I feel really bloated and I'm not gonna have the greatest training session. So like if this is a consistent thing, I'll sit down and have a talk with them and be like, look, I understand that this is something that you really enjoy doing, but is there a way that we can try and manage this better in order to have it not negatively impact your training? Do I need to program differently for you, or do we need to somehow have a talk about maybe your external habits? Because I don't have an issue if you want to go out and drink, like that's your life. I can't tell you what to do, but you have to learn on your own that this is not going to benefit you and your goals. And so at that point, like I got to sit down, kind of be the adult and be like, hey, this is not helping you. I understand you enjoy it, but maybe we need to take a step back and do things a little bit differently. Like maybe we're not drinking until we're blackout drunk, or maybe we're not eating bar food until we feel sick, like sometimes you got to be the adult with adults.
Yeah. And then as far as that variable checklist, is that something that kind of adapts to, I guess, the level of the lifter? Because I would assume that someone who's an elite level lifter, even if they have a coach or not, can kind of be able to assess the variables on their own versus someone who's new that doesn't really even know what the variables are.
Oh, absolutely. When you're dealing with somebody new, you have to repeat yourself a lot more because it's not something that they've ever dealt with. They've never been held accountable and had to self-assess. And somebody that's been doing it for a long time can pretty much look you dead in the eye and be like, yeah, this happened and that's why this sucks. Like, I know why my training sucked today and I'm going to do better next time. It's like a lot of the time, I don't even have to have that conversation with my higher level athletes. They come to me with that information already. But a newer lifter won't even think about that. They'll just be like, today sucked. I didn't lift what I was supposed to lift in their mind. They didn't lift what they were supposed to lift. And so you need to remind them, hey, we have this checklist. Let's self assess and understand why it didn't go well. Because 9 times out of 10, it's not that you're not strong enough, it's just something outside of the gym didn't go where we needed it to go.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny that you say that because what's today, Tuesday? Yeah, literally yesterday I was struggling on bench and I was doing like a 3x3 and I did my last warm up and then I made a big jump and then I missed and then I dropped down and missed that weight and then I was like, all right, I gotta just stop being a bitch. And then I did it on my third set and I was like, so I sent it to my coach and I was like, yeah, I'm putting in this weight, but I did this last set at this weight just because I was being a bitch for some reason. I don't know why.
And sometimes like those variables actually don't have anything to do with outside of the gym factors. It could literally be like you just warmed up stupid.
Yeah.
And like that's your job as a coach to teach them how to do those things. You can't expect a lifter to know how to warm up. So like I've heard it from people where they'll get new clients and like their lifter doesn't know how to warm up properly. It's like you can't expect them to.
Yeah.
Like it's your job to teach them. Or like they get the questions of like, how do I warm up at a meet? It's not firsthand knowledge for a new lifter to know. Like you don't change anything in a meet setting. Warm up as you normally. It's not for them to know. It's your job to teach them.
Hmm.
And while lifters need to have accountability and like they need to be able to self-assess, you as the coach, it is your job to remind them, to coach them, and to teach them those things.
Yeah, and I think speaking of variables, I think that's something that is something that's often overlooked on a meet day. I think a lot of
Mhm.
people try to do these different things, whether it's a different eating or they try a different pre workout or they try something different with their warm ups at the meet that they haven't done all prep, and then they wonder why they have a shitty meet.
Right. It's like don't overcomplicate it. Don't change anything. Like a meet should not be a complicated process, right? Like you're literally doing 9 lifts, like once.
Yeah,
That's it. So like don't change anything. Don't eat anything different. Don't eat like an asshole the day before. Like you have to remember, and I try to explain this to my lifters is like you're eating to perform. And newer lifters get that 24-hour break and they think that it's like, okay, I just get to stuff my face with as much food as possible. That's the biggest mistake you can make because the food that you put in your face is going to either help you have a good day or it's going to be detrimental. You don't want to shit your pants on the platform first and foremost, but you also want to be able to have sustainable energy throughout the day. And if you're just like eating crap food the day prior, you're probably not going to sleep very well going into the meet because you're going to be bloated and your heart rate is going to be through the roof because you've had too much carbs and too much sugar. Um, and so like teaching lifters that like that 24-hour prior to a meal or to a meet or whether it's a 2-hour weigh-in, that's not an opportunity for you to just eat like a dick.
yeah, and
Like you're eat like an athlete.
yeah, and I'm a firm believer in the more variables you can eliminate before a meet, the better your meet's gonna go.
Exactly.
And especially an equipped meet where there's already 1,000 extra variables. So if you're changing variables without even the equipment involved, you're in for a rough day.
Absolutely. Like people will come into a meet and put on brand new sleeves. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, oh my God, I can't get them on, or I can't take them off, and now I have to cut them off, and like then that elevates your stress. And it's like, why are you changing these things on meet day? You're not doing anything positive for yourself.
Yeah. And then I guess more with the relationship with your athletes. What are some of the things that maybe are like deal breakers to you where I guess you would cut them off as an athlete?
I think the biggest thing would just be a lack of communication. If I'm doing my part to consistently reach out to you and check in with you, and you're either not doing your programming or you're doing your programming, but you're not communicating with me, like I can't do my job. And if I can't do my job, I don't want you on my team because you're not showing me that well, you're showing me that I want it more than you do.
Yeah.
And it's a two-way street. And I think a lot of people don't consider that. They expect so much from their coach, but like we also need effort from the client. And I'm pretty patient with a lot of things, but when it comes to that, and if I'm like going above and beyond for you and you can't so much as communicate with me, I'll just let you go.
Yeah, and it's like anything in life where you get more out of it what you put into it, and just
Exactly.
just because you're paying someone doesn't mean you have no responsibility. Like you still have to put in the work, and to get better yourself, you need to do what your coach is asking of you.
Sure. And like I said, I'm very patient with a lot of things. I want to work with my clients and because people go through things, right? Life happens. And I've helped a lot of people for free when, they were in hard times. Like, I don't care. As long as you are putting in the effort. And if we are in that period of where, say, you're not paying me just because something happened and you can't afford it, but you still want to put the effort in and you're showing me that you still want to be a good athlete of mine, like I don't care because you're putting that effort in and I will return that to you. Um, it's when like you want me to do all the work for you. Like I'm not here to hold your hand.
Yeah.
You have to want it. I can't want it more than you.
Yeah, and then as far as kind of maybe bringing on a new client or kind of assessing them, what are some of the things that you kind of go through when you have someone new sign up?
So well, when it comes to communicating with somebody new, I obviously have an application and inquiry. They fill that out first, and then that kind of just prompts me um, things that I need to talk to them about. So I'll open up the conversation. I'll usually ask them about their lifting history. I want to understand why they came to me and why they think that I can help them because I think that helps create a decent relationship of understanding, like why you chose me. Because there's so many other coaches out there. I want to know why you chose me and how you think I can help you best. I get to know them on a lifting scale, and then I want to know about their personal life. Like, what do you do outside of the gym? What do you have for hobbies outside of the gym? And what is something that really interests you? Because I think when it comes to working with people, when they don't have a life outside of the gym and the gym is their life, that can be very dangerous.
Yeah.
Um, because if something goes wrong in the gym, then your whole life is bad. So that's something that I always ask about is like, what is something that you enjoy doing outside of the gym? And do you have interests that have nothing to do with the gym? Um, and then from there, I like to assess a few of their lifting videos. So I like to provide feedback firsthand to show them like, I'm seeing something, this is what we can work on. I think if you can provide value off the top, then you're gonna have a client. And so that's something that I've done from the start. I want to show them that like, okay, this is something that I'm seeing and we can work on this and this is my plan for what we can do moving forward. When they decide to sign on, they go through an assessment with Shem, who does like a full body assessment, and she provides me with that information, much like she does with Stu. And then we're able to work together and build the appropriate program for the client.
So I guess a question that I have from that, say, I'm assuming you don't necessarily kind of like cold call people anymore at this point.
No.
But so for someone, if that's someone who's kind of getting into it, and I mean I know that is one strategy, but obviously you see the people on the internet that'll give you that unsolicited advice that often sucks for the most part, and is annoying to see sometimes. But for someone that maybe you see someone that they're you can see their strong potential, but you see a few flaws in their lifting, and you know they don't have a coach. Like what are some maybe the ways you'd approach that?
Um, I usually wouldn't approach the person if I don't know them, if I haven't actively communicated with them in the past. But if I were to do so, I always come in with like, hey, I love what you're doing right now, but I have noticed a few things. I would be curious if you would accept some information. If you'd be willing to have a conversation about, say it's a squat video. If you would be interested in having a conversation about your squat, I'd love to be able to help you with a few things that I've noticed. If not, I totally understand and respect that. I think the way you approach that can really determine how somebody takes it. And as long as you're asking and not just putting information in their face, it comes a little bit more, it's a little softer. It's a softer approach.
Yeah.
And it shows that like you genuinely want to help them. You're not just like, hey, this is wrong. You should do this.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more, and I think that's kind of just that was a question that I kind of knew the answer to, but wanted to just hear it from someone else. But hopefully, that if anyone's seeing this that are just DMing people being like, "Your squat sucks, do this," please stop that. It's annoying.
Yes. No, nobody likes it. Or like if you're commenting on their post, like nobody likes that. Even as like somebody like myself that, coaches, Stu's one of the best coaches out there. It's like, if you're going to provide me with unsolicited advice, like I think you're an asshole. like, like at my level of coaching and my level of being an athlete, like even I think that's a dick move.
Yeah,
And I would much rather somebody be like, hey, would you be open to having a conversation about this? I've watched you squat for a bit and I think maybe this would help. But if you don't want to have that conversation, I totally respect that. Like you have to ask first and then you have to appreciate whether or not they say yes or no.
yeah, and then I guess diving into the programming itself, maybe tell us about how you structure it. Kind of what are the ways you check in on them, and the frequency that you kind of check in on them.
So I communicate with my lifters every day. I think if you're going to do this as a full-time job, you don't really have a reason as to why you don't talk to your lifters every day.
Yeah,
Like that is your job. And even if it wasn't, I think I would still make time to communicate with my lifters every day because I'm not a huge fan of like that I check in with every lifter on one specific day. I would rather understand what's going on a daily basis because then you can make adjustments on the fly. Um, I use Train Heroic for programming. It's been the easiest thing for me. I like the layout of it. All my clients like it, so super easy. Now, when it comes to programming, I'm very much an it depends kind of coach. Every block is going to look different for every client. Some clients need to deload every 4 weeks. Some don't need to deload until 8 or even 12 weeks. It just really depends on the level of the lifter, even the sex of the lifter. But the way I structure blocks is you kind of got to get to know the lifter and understand when they really need that deload. You can undulate as much as you want, but if a lifter has a lot of life stuff going on, like for instance, I have a client, Sam. He's been my client for 5 years now, and rehabbed him back from a tib fib shatter in a dual accident. He got into an accident in January, so it would have been 3, 4 years ago. And then on his way to the hospital, the ambulance got into an accident.
oh my god.
So he was told that he would probably never squat and deadlift again, and he's closing in on 700-pound deadlift and a 600-pound squat. So with him, because he is also a coach and a personal trainer, for those that don't do that, it's a very mentally taxing job. You have to be on all the time in person, and you work early hours, and you also work long days. And he comes into his training sessions sometimes just gassed because he's mentally tired. And so for him, the best way to structure his program is I deload him every 4 weeks. Just because, I mean, for the amount that he lifts, he's pretty strong. And for his lifestyle and his job, he needs that deload every 4 weeks. If he doesn't have it, then we start to see things break down and he starts to regress really fast. Also, he's got longer leverages, so he's got long arms, long legs. So it's harder for him to push for longer periods of time. Whereas I have a smaller female lifter, I deload her every 8 weeks. So I think you have to understand how every athlete is going to be different and structure the block around what they need and what they're like. That doesn't just come into their training, it also comes into what their lifestyle looks like.
Yeah, and for me recently, I think I had a program deload like a week or two ago, but I was at a point where I was like feeling really good and I kind of wanted to keep the momentum going.
Mhm.
So I basically reached out to my coach. I was like, hey, I feel better than I have in the past like 6 months. So I don't want to deload right now. And we adjusted it. And I do like the idea of having a program deload, but I think it should be more gray than black and white. I just wanted
I
to hear
agree.
your opinion on that too.
No, I totally agree. So the plan is to have that structured deload, but when you communicate with your lifters on a daily basis, you know how they're feeling.
Yeah.
And if things are feeling really good, we can go into that deload week and we can kind of leave an asterisk by the program and be like, hey, if you're feeling really good today, let's push this a little bit. And that's where the communicating every day really comes into play because if you're not communicating with them but once a week, you're not really going to know how they're feeling on a day-to-day session, right? So you can make those instant changes when you talk to them every day.
Yeah, and then as far as you, I know you said you dropped out of a meet to kind of focus on other things, but
Yeah.
it seemed like you kind of wanted to shift your training into a little bit more of a bodybuilding style. So what kind of maybe got you to that point where you decided to drop out, and kind of what sparked your interest in the building?
So I was originally set to do Power Surge, which was the end of September.
Yeah,
And we pivoted to another peak just because there were some errors that were made in training and whatnot. And I had also just got to Vegas, so there was some lifestyle stuff going on. So we flipped to do a meet in San Diego the 3rd of November. And the more I got through basically doing a second peak, the more I was just kind of losing interest in it. Um, and for the first time in a long time, I'm actually having a bit of a life outside of the gym. So I'm getting older and I want to kind of take a step back and just kind of invest in myself versus just my training. It's super easy to, wake up, eat, train, sleep, and repeat, but you can also burn out. And it's really hard to build relationships outside of the gym when your life is in the gym. So it wasn't an easy decision, but I also think it's a decision that can be positive in my coaching endeavors too, because it's something that people can relate to. I never want somebody to feel like they have to do a meet. The thing with powerlifting and bodybuilding or whatever is that there's always going to be another meet, there's always going to be another competition. And so many people feel so much guilt for dropping a competition. But like, if you're really not invested in it, if your heart and your mind is not in it, it's okay to not do it. There's always going to be another one. And we just pivot your training. Like, it's not a big deal. Um, and I just decided, like, I think I just want to kind of, obviously, I want to focus on the big three. I still have things that I need to do. Um, but I want to take a step back and I want to put a little bit more emphasis on building some tissue. The big thing that we realized this peak was I'm really small. Like my weight kept dipping below 170 and there's no reason for that. So my goal between now and say like June, which is when I kind of intend to compete next, would be to try and add like 2 to 5 pounds of tissue if I can.
yeah,
Um, and that's just going to benefit me on the platform regardless. And I think a lot of lifters don't really consider that. They just want to get on the platform as much as possible. But taking time away from the platform so you can actually build good tissue is only going to help you in the long run. And, I've been doing this for a decade and I'm getting to that point where, like, if I want to be better, I kind of have to take more time away from the platform to actually be better in different places.
100%. And something that seems to be a recurring theme with like elite level lifters and coaches, and kind of even just a shift in the sport itself, is the idea of longevity. Powerlifting is a long game,
Mhm.
and doing things like stepping away to do other things in life, or maybe taking a time off the platform but still working and kind of building your body, is something that's only going to get your career to that next level. If you just keep hammering meets every 3 months, you're going to be done with the sport in 4 years.
Exactly. That's such a good point. Like it's a marathon, 100%. And most people don't get into this and they're like, I'm just going to do this for a couple of years and then be done. Like that typically doesn't happen unless they can't progress because they keep getting hurt and they're training like an idiot. But a lot of people get into this because they want to do it for as long as possible. And like fitness and lifting will always be a part of my life. And I do love powerlifting. I love the community. I love being a part of it, coaching it. I love helping at meets and spotting and loading. But at some point, competing needs to kind of take a you need to take a step back from being on the platform in order to get better at being on the platform. And I don't think enough people do that.
Yeah, and I think that's a big problem with like the younger lifters, like 19, 18 and stuff,
Hmm.
or the people who are pretty much just doing powerlifting so they can post it on social media, and or that are in college, and you're gonna look in 4 years that account's gonna be deleted.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird generation because I always wonder if a lot of these kids would be doing it if it wasn't for social media. And I don't mean
No.
social media introduced them to it. It's if they didn't have anything to post on, would they do it? And I
Af-
don't think that they would.
nope, I don't think so. I think about 50% of college lifters would probably not be competing.
It's, with Sebum retiring, I think his speech was actually a lot of people could learn something from the speech. And I've always kind of looked at training in the same way that I would say he has in his road to the Olympia and all that is like you have to appreciate the journey of it. And I know that's corny and whatnot, but like if you don't appreciate that aspect, you're never going to enjoy the longevity of it, right? Like you're just going to want it here and now, and what is that going to get you? An injury back to back, and then you're done. You're out. You can't compete anymore, right? Like, enjoy the process of training. Like, I love training. It's the most fun for me. If I can go into the gym and just blast out, whether it's like squatting, benching, deadlifting, and then like get a sick pump, I love that part of any kind of aspect of training, whether it's bodybuilding, powerlifting. I love it. Like, I've done CrossFit, I've done Olympic weightlifting. I just love the hard work. And you have to enjoy that in order to continue to do it for as long as you possibly can.
Yeah, and unless you're maybe an exception would be like if you're setting an all-time world record or something, but if you look back
Sure.
on your powerlifting journey and you're kind of thinking about your career, you're not going to remember one of the 45 meets you ended up doing or some random local meet. You're going to remember those training sessions where you were grinding your ass off or you were up at the gym squatting with your crew on a Sunday and just having a good time. And it's not about the, yes, we want to hit the big numbers, but we're here to make friends. We're here to have fun. And it's more than just getting on the platform.
Exactly. And with that, I think the outside of the gym aspect also really comes into play. It's like you're not going to be crying about backing out of that meet, 5 years from now if you got to go do something way more fun and like make real memories with someone or friends or whatever, like the amount of things that I've passed up because, oh, I was in prep.
Yeah.
Like eh, you pass up so much and so many opportunities and experience to invest in the gym and invest in training. And like, I completely get it. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but if that's the way you're going to continue to live your life, you're going to miss out on so many other things as well. And there has to be that. I don't necessarily know if like balance can exist, but there has to be some kind of balance where you are investing in a life outside of the gym just as much as you invest in what you do in the gym because they're going to make each other better.
Yeah. And unless you're like you said, unless your job is full-time coaching, I mean, as an athlete, that is never going to pay the bills. I don't think powerlifting
Mm-mm.
will ever be able to pay the bills.
No, and that's a huge thing. Like, even though I was just competing in San Diego, is still a travel meet, right? Like, what's it worth it to me if I'm going to be spending money and not making money? And unless you're at the top level and you're surely going to win some money, you know, traveling to meets, like whether it's across country or whatever, like paying for Airbnbs and flights, like that's expensive. And if you're willing to do that just for the experience, I've done it, so and I support it. But you also have to consider the fact that like a lot of the time you're going to be putting out money and you're not going to be getting it back. And there are other things that you could probably do with that money that might be a little bit more worthwhile.
Yeah. And I think this is something that kind of just crossed my mind, but um, when you bring up traveling to meets, I think it's important for the lifters to actually go out and explore the area that they're traveling to, not just go
I
there,
agree.
go in their hotel, go to Olive Garden, and go to bed. Like, make it a trip. If
Yeah,
you're going to go across the country for the week, go make some plans outside of the meet day. Go enjoy the
I
time with your
agree.
friends.
Yeah, like a lot of people that go to Ghost, take a few days off to explore Miami and go to the beach. Like that's the worst thing to do. Even like as a coach, if I'm going somewhere to coach, like I like to take an extra day because usually where I'm traveling to, I have friends. And I like to take an extra day so I can actually see my friends
Yeah.
instead of just being there, oh, I got to coach for 8 hours and then I'm flying out. Like that becomes exhausting too. Like if I'm going somewhere, I want to spend time either on my own exploring or I want to be with my friends.
Yeah. And for you, what are some goals that you have maybe kind of to wrap up this year, or whether it's personal or for your business?
Personal, I think the biggest thing for me in both aspects would be one, I really, really want to invest in just like building a personal life and actually doing things outside of the gym because I've given up a lot of time for that. I'm in Vegas now, which is oddly a hockey town, and I love hockey. And I want to go to as many hockey games as I can. Hopefully, travel to the mountains in Utah, but just fall in love with training again because I've kind of just not gotten bored with it, but I'm mentally kind of like burnt out from it.
Hmm.
So I want to like find that love for it again, and it does come back.
Yeah.
So anybody that is in that place, like it does come back. Sometimes you just need to pivot. When it comes to business wise, content, want to continue to put out content. We have a really great videographer at Fight or Quit that I'm starting to work with and put out content. So I'm excited for that. Um, and I would say, yeah, those would be kind of like my two goals and two things that I'm focusing on up until the end of the year. And then next year, it's who knows what'll happen, but it probably won't be much different.
So with being new to Vegas, kind of how has that experience been for you?
I never thought I would want to live in Vegas ever. It's like it's a desert, it's so hot, especially being from Canada and Alberta, where all it did was snow for like 6 months. Um, Vegas is so much fun. And a lot of people just think Vegas is the strip, but there's so much more to it. And like I mentioned, it's now apparently a hockey town, which is great for me. So like last month, I bought a pair of hockey tickets to go see the Oilers when they come down to play the Knights, and I'm so excited for that. Um, but there's always events going on, always. Like there's things coming into town, or there's just always things to do. And I think that's one of the biggest shifts in my mentality, or what caused one of the biggest shifts is like I'm in a place now where I have friends that I want to do things with, and I want to go and explore and experience the place that I live instead of just like going to the gym every day and coming home. Because I call that survival mode. Like you're just waking up and doing the same thing over and over and over again. And it's like Groundhog Day every day. And that's not that fun. So I love Vegas. I think more people should give Vegas at its core a chance because there's so many things to do here. There's hiking, you travel a couple hours and you're in Utah, you travel a few hours and you're at the ocean. Like, it's really not a bad place to be.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it.
And as far as the shift in mindset, maybe how has that changed your training itself regarding like frequency or intensity, things like that?
So I haven't gotten my new program yet from Stu. I will get that on Sunday. But something that we worked on a lot within the last year, Stu and myself, was neuroticism around training. I was a very neurotic person and I would put so much emphasis on the numbers I was hitting in the gym. And over the past year, I've really, really gotten good at, and I say this lightly because I think you have to care, but I've really gotten good at not caring so much. You can't put so much emphasis on things and let it control your life. And I got to the point where I was like, whatever happens, happens. Whatever I hit today is what I meant to hit, and I'm not going to let it ruin my day if I don't hit some obscure number that I feel like I should be hitting. I think people need to get over this mindset of like, I should be doing this. Because if you should be doing it, you would be doing it. And you don't get to make those calls. Your body's going to tell you whether or not you should be lifting that or not.
Yeah.
So um, that's where my mindset shifted, working with Stu on that and just becoming less neurotic and just enjoying the process a lot more.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's something a lot of lifters should kind of think about more is maybe you have a plan of what number you want to hit. And for someone like me or anyone who trains like conjugate style, where you have these crazy ass variations where you've probably only
Hmm.
maybe done it once before and you probably won't do it another time for another year or so, you can have an idea of what you want to hit, but just all those different variables and you could just have not be firing on all cylinders that day. Like have an idea, but if you come up short or if you go past it, like you can't be too focused on that.
No, and that's where like a lot of people, I think, like they don't appreciate RPE or RAR enough.
Yeah.
Like there's a reason why it exists.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, well, I like working with percentages a lot more. I like being told what to lift. It's like, okay, but then how are you going to feel if you don't hit that exact number? Are you going to beat yourself up for it?
Yeah.
Also, like if you're given a number, you're still allowed to auto regulate. And if your coach gets mad at you, I mean, your coach probably has a stick shoved up their ass. But like auto regulation exists, use it and understand that like some days are going to be great and you're going to be able to push, and other days, like you might have to pull it back 10%, but that doesn't mean you're not progressing.
Yeah. And with RP, I think it's something that's a great tool, but it has to be utilized correctly. And um,
Yes.
I'm a big fan of if you haven't experienced a true RP 10, like it's going to take some work to figure that out.
Right. And I think a lot of people, especially when they're newer to it, they kind of get upset when they hit an RP10. They're like, oh, that was such a grind. It was so hard. I don't have any more. And it's like, okay, that's great. Now we know where your 10 is and you know what that feels like. So now we can build off of that. And I think uh, more coaches should push their lifters to find an RP10 because that's so important for progress. If you're constantly sitting in that like RP 7, 8 realm, how are they going to know how to push? Like when they get to a meet, how are they going to know how to push themselves to that, what a third attempt should ideally look like?
Yeah. And with that too, I think um, RP has a lot of accountability on the lifter himself because
Mm-hmm.
someone like me, I'm very explosive, so it'll just straight up stop. Like on a bench, it'll come off the chest and then just stop. Like I don't have that
Right.
ability to grind. So unless that lifter truly knows what they're actually feeling and whether they're being honest about it, you can't tell an RPE on a video. I mean, you can tell when someone's sandbagging it for sure, but in
Yeah.
terms of like an 8, 7, where it's like it could look slower, it could look quicker, you gotta, it's all on the lifter there.
That and it's also like people gauging RPE around the entire lift. I think you need to kind of look at RPE as like where the lifter struggles the most. Like it might be fast off the chest, but going back to my client Sam, with his long arms, he's slower at lockout. So that's where I'm going to gauge his RPE. So through that final extension, if it slows down, that's where we're going to call RPE because he's fast off the chest, but it'll hit a wall much like you, and like he has a hard time grinding through it. So that's where I'm going to call his RPE.
Okay, that's a really good thing. I haven't thought of it like that, but that's definitely something I'll keep in mind. I think we can kind of wrap things up here. So I'll ask you my final question. If you could give a new powerlifter or someone going into their first meet a word of advice, what would that be?
This is going to sound super corny, but my best piece of advice would literally be to just have fun. If it's your first meet, your goal is to just get a total, get as close to 9 for 9 as possible, and just enjoy the experience. Because when you're coaching a new lifter to a meet, your hope is that they're going to fall in love with it and want to continue doing it. And if they're not having fun and their confidence gets shit on, they're probably not going to want to do it again. So always go in, have fun. We don't get paid to do this, but you should be having fun in the process.
Definitely, and I think kind of gauging to go 9 for 9 for your first meet is important. It kind of, like you said, it builds the confidence, and it's you should almost look at it like a scrimmage in a football game where it kind of lets you learn the rules, lets you learn the flow, and then it can start setting you up
Hmm.
to have some big meets in the future.
Absolutely. I remember something that Seth Albertsworth said a while back, talking about like what your meet attempt should look like. And there's nothing wrong with not like sending it all the time at every meet. And I think a lot of lifters think that they have to do that, but it's okay to leave some gas in the tank, especially if it's going to help you build confidence. And that's really what it does. You leave a little bit of gas in the tank, you have a really good meet, and then they are able to build faster momentum when they get into the off season. So
Yeah,
yeah,
100%. Well, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to come on. It was my pleasure.
no, thank you so much. I had a lot of fun.
Great.